Good morning, everyone. My name is Richard Ponte, and I'm the Director of Events and Programs for the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. On behalf of the entire team here, it is my pleasure to welcome you to On the Horizon, what to expect in the next legislative session, the latest in our webinar series. Thank you for joining. Before we get going, there are just a few things we'd like to share with you about today's session. All participants are in listen-only mode. Please submit questions using the Q&A function. Time permitting, we will answer them by the end of the session. We will also use the Q&A feature to share useful links and other materials. The meeting is being recorded, and we will make the recording available to you on our website in the next few days. And finally, if you lose your connection, please use the same Zoom link to reconnect. We would now like to begin by thanking our sponsors. Our premier sponsor is Unitil, and our 2025 webinar series sponsors are AARP, Bangor Savings Bank, and Northeast Delta Dental. Again, many thanks to all of our sponsors this morning. It is now my pleasure to introduce the President and CEO of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, Patrick Woodcock. Patrick will be moderating the conversation today. Good morning, Patrick.
Well, good morning. The legislature kicked off yesterday for 2025, and as I outlined in a memo to all members, the context of the economy matters with all public policy. Right now, Maine has practically full employment, but there are a number of risks that we're looking at. First, we're looking at the tariffs that are being proposed by the incoming Trump administration, and Maine may be particularly vulnerable depending on how those are designed. Secondly, new laws are taking effect in Maine. In particular, Maine's paid family medical leave is affecting every business, every employee's bottom line starting this year. And also, we're looking at a budget structural gap that will dominate the discussions in the legislature. Revenues have held steady, yet Medicaid expenses are projected to sizably impact a structural gap. We're very pleased to present with our advocacy team what we see as the key priorities. Before I do, though, our priorities really started this summer. In reflection of the legislature, the session before us, it was clear that the process of the legislature needed to be reformed. I think we're off to a good start. The Maine Chamber of Commerce has asked all candidates who ran for office where they stood on basic transparency and how to improve the efficiency of the legislature. We've seen some results, and that has really been led by Speaker Fecteau. We really do appreciate Speaker Fecteau for joining us at the outset of this. He, I think, shares a vision of improving what it means to be a legislative body and ultimately how the Maine legislature can work for all of its constituents and the business community. With that, I will introduce Speaker Fecteau, who's returning to the legislature, and I would ask if he would provide some context of his priorities for this upcoming legislature and hopefully have some time for a few questions. Speaker Fecteau.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks, Patrick, for the introduction. It's great to be on this webinar, joining you, the State Chamber, as well as members and participants from across the state. This is a good opportunity to certainly learn about the upcoming session, what's on the horizon. I think Patrick laid out a lot of the the top issues that we'll be facing, particularly the budget, as is always a focus, but certainly with a different revenue picture, creating some additional challenges for us to overcome, and I think we will. I served in the legislature for 8 years before being termed out. Was not expecting to make a return to the legislature, at least anytime soon. And happenstance would have it that my state rep decided not to run for re-election, and I am back here. I find myself back in the legislature, and crazy enough, find myself back as speaker, which is pretty unusual to be speaker in a first term, and certainly the first time in a long time that we've had a speaker who's returned to the position. The last time was 1972, so it's been a while since a speaker has taken a term off and returned to the post. But I think it's a good thing in many ways, because I've been able to gain some perspective in the time I've had away about, as Patrick pointed out, the functioning of the legislature, the way things work in the building, and having that opportunity to step away for a couple of years and see things from a different vantage point was certainly helpful to me. And doing the work that we are undertaking right now in the Joint Rules Committee to make some important changes to how we function, how the process is whether or not the process is accessible to the public, which is, I think, extremely important. And so we're making some changes in the joint rules. We also made some changes through the committee rules, which are being adopted as committees start to do their work. And some of those changes have been also pretty significant and based on a lot of feedback that we receive from the public and from advocates. With that being said, listen, this is an important session on a number of levels. We have still rising costs on the housing side. People are unable to find places to live. I know employers constantly struggle to hire because they can't find their employees or their prospective employees can't find housing within striking distance of where they're going to work. I've heard many times people making offers or businesses making offers to prospective employees and eventually that employee having to rescind because they can't find somewhere to live. So we need to continue to make some progress there. I was very thankful to see the chamber publish a memo related to housing and the chamber's priorities, many of which I agree with, and I think we'll be able to advance in this legislative session. It continues our momentum on getting more supply. This is a simple supply and demand issue. We need more housing. We have too much. We have more demand than we have in terms of supply. We need more of it in order to start to right the ship, and I think we're going to get there. The other major issue, and I know the chamber has been a good partner in this work as well, as childcare. Probably another common reason why folks are either leaving the workforce or not rejoining the workforce is because they simply cannot find affordable childcare, if they can find childcare at all. I've heard from moms and dads who have told me that they are on wait lists that seem to never dwindle, and they ultimately, if they do get to the top of the list, they sometimes just can't even afford the cost of childcare. In fact, some people are choosing not to work because the cost of childcare is so great that it just doesn't really add up to join the workforce again. These are things we need to solve. We've made some progress on those issues when I was speaker 4 years ago, but we still have some of these same challenges. We need to have more access to childcare. One thing that I'll be working on is a proposal to ensure that family childcare providers, someone who is operating childcare out of their home, is able to do so. In some communities, there's restrictions in residential zones around whether or not someone can have family childcare out of their home. And I think that given the grave need in this area, and also the fact that it's licensed by DHHS, it's governed, there are many barriers to entry. I think that if someone wants to be able to run childcare out of their home, they should be able to do so. Those are a few things that I think are on the horizon. Patrick talked about the budget. We'll be working through that. Expect to get the budget from the governor on Friday. We'll start combing through what's being proposed and working towards a budget that we can agree with and that establishes our priorities and balances the budget ultimately. I know there will also be a supplemental budget delivered on Friday, and that will be a true emergency supplemental, which we haven't had in a little while because revenues have been in a more positive direction. So we'll have to work through that supplemental budget first and foremost, and hopefully get the necessary support to pass that. So those are a few things on the horizon. Those are some of my priorities, and certainly look forward to working with the chamber on a number of them. I know housing and childcare have been a top the list, and we're going to get some good things done to advance those issues this session.
Well, thank you, Speaker Facto. It's striking across the state, housing, childcare really are some prominent issues for businesses. We just did a survey and housing was a top 3 issue. childcare was right behind it. And it's striking. I think there has been some great work. We now have regional housing targets. We have a housing goal. We've laid the groundwork with some planning. Would you be able to give, areas that you're looking at in housing that you think could build on that work?
Yeah, I mean, the chamber's memo speaks to minimum lot sizes. I have a real interest in trying to address that. In some communities, to build even a single family home, you're looking at, having 2 or 3 acres of land to build that first home. I'm totally supportive of protecting rural and certainly farmland. But when there's public water and public sewer that exists and that you can connect to, having requirements that are so great like that, 2, 3 acres, 1 acre. I mean, the requirements are just totally out of balance with reality. And what, a lot of people are building is, a lot of homes in many communities are built on a much smaller square footage than having an acre. And so I have a proposal that will include reducing the minimum lot size in communities where there's access to public sewer and public water to a much more reasonable level. I also think we need to continue to make some progress on accessory dwelling units. We were able to accomplish a great deal 4 years ago. One of the barriers that remains for accessory dwelling units is the access to lending. And what's currently happening is most communities, except for, as far as I know, most communities except for the town of Yarmouth, require that you have the owner living on site where the ADU is going to be built. So either the primary dwelling or the accessory dwelling must be owner occupied. And what happens is the assessed value decreases as a result because you don't have two potential rental incomes. And so instead of having the ability to rent out both units, you really can only rent out one because of this restriction, which don't think really I don't think it gets enforced properly, if at all. But what it's doing is artificially decreasing the ability for folks, Mainers, to access capital to build accessory dwelling units. And so I'd like to see that requirement go away so that people can get the lending they need to actually build an ADU on their property. And I understand that in many cases, this owner occupancy requirement is an attempt to address short-term rentals. But I don't think that this is the policy that actually addresses that issue. In fact, I think it's just basically been not enforced, but it is preventing people from getting lending. So ADUs, continue to make some progress on some zoning changes, and then additional funding for housing. We have relied mostly on American Rescue Plan dollars to really drive production over the last few years. Those funds are obviously not going to be around any longer, and we need to continue to make progress on the affordable housing tax credit that we passed 6 years ago, 5 years ago. The rural rental housing program, which has been super successful, building smaller multifamily housing buildings not to exceed 18 units. And we've seen really awesome projects, including a really awesome one in Skowhegan that's resulted from that program, and the Maine Affordable Home Ownership Program, which is a little bit of higher earners, 120% of area median income, and we've seen a lot of great projects coming forward on that. I know of one in Wells. There's been one in Booth Bay that's been underway. So bringing home ownership opportunities to people as well, which we all know there are a lot of folks out there who are ready to take that step, and they're just struggling to find the ability to afford that first home purchase. And we know that home ownership creates wealth, and it's an extremely important part of the American dream.
Well, let me just reinforce, it's an important issue for employers. We're also losing a whole generation of Mainers. And it used to be a state where you could afford a house compared to other regions. And we're starting to lose population in the Northeast to the Southeast, where we're seeing higher production of housing. It's an issue that I really do hope unites the legislature. It should not be a partisan issue. We've built some good work, and I'm very encouraged with your leadership and the chamber supporting this work that we can really expand production of housing. I do see that there is a question in the chat. Effectively, it says a appreciate the focus on affordable childcare. I'm curious to hear thoughts on what might be coming related to childcare workforce. Some centers could accept more children if they had workforce to do so.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's part of the work that I've done when I was speaker last time was creating a wage supplement. Childcare workers were the lowest paid in the state in any sector. I think they were making about $12.40 an hour. The wage stipend has got them up to just under $15. Um, that was passed 4 years ago. There are some tweaks that I want to make to it. One thing that I think would be helpful is increasing the wage supplement for childcare workers who are full-time employees and either keeping it at the same level or decreasing it for those who are part-time. And hopefully it will be an incentive for someone to become a full-time worker in the childcare sector by increasing that wage supplement. So I think that's one key component is getting that wage supplement increased for those who are working full-time in childcare. I spoke to the family child care aspect with zoning because family child care is one of the challenges that the larger child care facilities have is the dollars and cents are really hard to make work. It is very, very challenging to keep the lights on. But family child care is actually the most viable model for childcare. Not that it's the only solution and certainly can't be the only solution, but it is the more financially viable model for childcare. And so, when I think about how we solve these problems, I think unlocking the ability for more folks who have that entrepreneurial spirit and want to start a childcare center or out of their own home, that they're able to do so, and that they're able to do so without having a municipal ordinance preventing them from doing so, including preventing them from having the number of kids that the DHHS allows to a licensee, which is 12. And in some communities, it's restricted below that 12 number. So I think that if DHHS license a family child care provider at 12, they should be able to do that, and it shouldn't be restricted lower than what DHHS licenses.
Appreciate that thoughtful response. Um, if there aren't any other questions, we'll let the speaker go. I'll just final question on um, legislative rules. There's a rules committee meeting this afternoon, building on the work on Monday. Any specific areas that you think the business community should be aware that you're implementing, and how to set the legislature on the right foot for a productive session?
Yeah, I mean, I think most folks who have been engaged in the legislative process over the years have become pretty familiar with concept drafts and probably familiar in a sense that they've been frustrated with concept drafts because they often have no language that suggests what they're actually trying to accomplish. And I'm really grateful for the work that the Joint Rules Committee did on Monday to start to advance a solution that doesn't quite get rid of them because they sometimes are useful, but at least gets us to a place that before a public hearing occurs, there's an actual draft of a bill that people can respond to, produce public testimony on, and they know what it is that they're 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 testifying about. I mean, in so many cases, you have these general ideas set before the committee, and in the course of business, the bill becomes something that no one really expected it would become. And I think that's a disservice to the public, and we'll hopefully get our arms around making that process better and more transparent and having a better sense of what a bill is actually trying to accomplish. And I think also puts pressure on sponsors, bill sponsors, to set course on what it is they're trying to do. When I started on committee a few moons ago, we'd had concept drafts, big ideas like an act to improve the Maine economy, and the sponsor would give some sense of like what they're trying to do, and then they just expect the committee to sort of do all the work for them. And there's just not enough time. There are thousands of bills. You can't just create a bill out of thin air. And so I think it will force sponsors to really give more thought. If you want to improve the Maine economy, give us some sense of what you think you're actually trying to do here so we can set course and actually get to work. But I think ultimately this new rule will discourage most people from using them.
It is true. The committee chairs, their work really is dispensing just piles of bills rather than looking at the best public policy. And we do expect a lot from these chairs with a limited duration of the session. So really focus on the most important aspects, the bills that have been thoughtfully designed. And we are very appreciative of that step on Monday and hope it builds this afternoon. Well, I think on behalf of the business community, we do appreciate the focus on the topics that you've raised, childcare, housing, joining us this morning, and we look in partnership to making this a productive session. Thank you very much, Speaker
Yeah,
Pecto.
thank you all. Great to see you. Thanks, Linda and Patrick and the team, and we'll see you in the halls of the State House.
Thank you.
Take care. With that, we want to bring a assessment from the professional advocacy staff with the Maine Chamber. And I'll begin by introducing Linda Caprera, seasoned hand with the legislature, who is our Vice President of Advocacy, for a little bit of a snapshot of the legislature before we get into the policy. Linda.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. The legislature is off and running. As Patrick said, yesterday they met for the first time this year, this calendar year, 2025. And they're off and running. This is a long session, which goes from January to June. So we hope, we don't hope it goes into July. But it's a new session. There's new legislators, there's returning legislators. So it's interesting to see, what the institutional memory will progress and how that will progress. But clearly, whenever there's a new legislature, you always have to wonder, how are they going to work within their own caucuses, across the aisle, down the hall with the administration? So that all remains to be seen. But those are our questions, and we'll actually, I'm sure we will look at that as in the next coming weeks to see what happens. But with that, clearly in the House and Senate, the margins have tightened. In the Senate, you have 20 Democrats to 15 Republicans. In the House, you have 75 Democrats, 73 Republicans, 1 unenrolled, 1 independent, and there is an open seat, Joe Perry's seat. As you know, he will be the new Secretary of State. There will be, from what we're told, a special election sometime in February to fill that seat. So we're looking forward to see what happens with that. With respect to leadership, you have pretty much all new leadership. In the Senate, you have Senator Maddie Daughtry, who is the new Senate president. You have Teresa Peirce, who is the majority leader. Jill Dewson, who is the assistant majority leader. Trey Stewart returns as the minority leader in the Senate. Matt Harrington is the assistant minority leader. As we know, we just spoke with Speaker Ryan Fecto. He is a new speaker. Matt Moonen in the House is the majority leader. Lori Gramlich is the assistant majority leader. And Billy Bob Falkingham is returning as the minority leader in the House, along with Katrina Smith as the assistant. So we have relatively new leadership. So again, how they're going to work together and how they're going to work across the aisle remains to be seen. But we're looking forward to working with all of them, as we all do. So what does this mean if you're looking at, this is the second term of the governor now. This is called, other words, the lame duck session, if you will. But the question becomes this is her last term. What is usually governors, their last term work on their legacy. What is her legacy going to be? We've seen her, really champion the expansion of broadband, housing, education, healthcare, a variety of different issues. She's been very good to the business community in not raising taxes, which we appreciate. But the question becomes is entering her new, her last term, what's going to be her priorities, I guess. And I'm sure we will find that out. The budget is coming out, as Speaker Fecto said, tomorrow. So that will indicate, I think, where her priorities are. They did release a statement earlier, the structural gap they had estimated to be about 636 million back in September. That's dropped a little bit to 450 million on the general side. So you're seeing a little bit of that. And I think she's urged some caution for the legislature not to raise taxes. Specifically, she said, don't look at individual income taxes, which is good for us because that is an issue that's likely to come up. There's likely to be bills in to increase the individual income tax rates. So, you know, what her priorities are going to be, again, remains to be seen. But I think she's urging fiscal restraint. You know, over the last several years, we've seen, particularly in the budget, and a lot of states around the country have seen this, particularly with respect to sales taxes. You know, people were home, they were working from home, they were spending money online. And sales taxes went up dramatically, double-digit figures. You never saw that before. But now those sales tax revenues have come back down to maybe a 3% or so. So they've really leveled off to really what they were before. So the revenues that have been there over the last 4 or 5 years are not there now. So there is going to have to be some fiscal restraint, or they're going to have to raise taxes, one or the other. So really kind of what's going on right now, what's happening right now with respect to committees, they are starting to meet. We saw some meeting yesterday, some are meeting today, appropriations is meeting today, and they will continue to meet over the next several weeks to do orientations, you know, kind of set their schedules, and really, you know, they're going to be getting legislation. I mean, we already have seen, I think I looked this morning, there's 139 bills already printed. So the bills are coming out fast and furious. How many of those are concept drafts? I have not looked yet. But as Speaker Fecto has indicated, that is an issue. That is certainly an issue. It has been in the past. So hopefully we won't see a lot of concept drafts. But again, it remains to be seen. So in the committees that I follow, which are appropriations, taxation, and IDEA. And again, we follow, you know, all the committees, but those are the committees that I concentrate on. There are some, you know, committee chairs on appropriations. Peggy Rotundo is returning as the Senate chair, and Drew Gattine is the House chair. Both have been served on those committees for a number of years. Jack Ducharme is the lead Republican on that committee. We are looking forward to working with all of them. They're wonderful, and looking forward to working with them on the budget issues. In taxation, you have Nicole Grahowski that is returning as Senate chair. You have Kristen Cloutier, who is now the House chair. Kristen has been on that committee a number of years, worked very well with her. So we're looking forward to working with both of them. We also have Representative Nikki returning, as well as Bruce Bickford is returning. He is back, he's in the Senate this year, and we're looking forward to working with Bruce as well, as we are with all the committee members. On the IDEA committee, you have Chip Curry returning as the Senate chair, and you have Tracy Geer as the House chair. You have a lot of folks on there that are returning as well, Amanda Calamar, Representative Walker. So we're looking forward to working with all those folks. And again, on some of these committees, you have a lot of folks that were on certain committees are on different committees this year. So it's been kind of a mix-up some of these committees. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ashley, and I'll come back later with a wrap up on the taxation priorities. Ashley?
Thank you, Linda, and thank you all for being here today. I just want to make one quick correction as I saw a question come in. So Joe Perry is the new state treasurer. Shenna Bellows is still Secretary of State.
Sorry.
Joe Perry, Shenna Bellows, and Aaron Fry were both sworn, or all three were sworn in yesterday by the governor. But anyway, just great to have you here with us today. My name's Ashley Lusky. I cover energy, utilities, technology, and environment and natural resource issues for the chamber. Just kind of want to go over the bills we anticipate coming before the legislature this session, and then briefly touch on what some of our priority issues are. So in EUT, I anticipate that we'll likely see a clean energy standard bill. Last March, there was a report that came out assessing Maine's renewable portfolio standard, and it provided some suggestions around adjustments to the categories referred to as the classes. And so, I think we can anticipate some of those likely coming out of the governor's energy office. With Maine's clean energy goals, we can expect, changes and increases in what that standard looks like. Another area that we're seeing across, not just in Maine, but kind of across the country is the need and technology for long duration energy storage. This area is really evolving, and I think that this session will likely see some bills on it. Tomorrow is cloture, and so we don't have the full list of bills before us, but I would anticipate some bills around energy storage incentives. Certainly, we've started seeing these on the federal level. In August, the U.S. Department of Energy awarded $147 million in funding for a long duration energy storage project to be located in Lincoln, which I think is really exciting for Maine. And definitely think because of that, as more people become aware on a more general level, we'll see some legislation around that topic. One that likely everyone on this call has heard about in the media or maybe is aware of from your own bills is the net energy billing policy. There has certainly been division around this over the years. On one hand, it's been very good for some businesses. On the other, critics feel it's costing non-participants more money. And so we have seen in recent years everything from legislation to repeal, legislation to amend, legislation to go a bit further on NEB. And so there has been one bill already referred to committee. That's a bill sponsored by Senator Stacey Guerin. It was on yesterday's calendar, and that bill would try to repeal the NEB program. I don't see this happening this session, but definitely anticipate more legislation forthcoming around this particular policy area. Another big area I think we can likely anticipate legislation on, maybe it's more in the form of a study, is on nuclear power. So across the country, states are beginning to revisit longstanding bans on nuclear power development as there's more energy demand for digital centers, data centers. With the increase of AI and streaming, these data centers are very energy intensive. And so kind of balancing the need for energy for those data centers while also all the other energy intensive needs we have. I think there is very much a question that remains how we integrate power for data centers into our energy plans, either directly or through clean energy portfolios in terms of nuclear. Last session, the first session, there was a bill titled An Act to Study the Construction of a Nuclear Power Facility in the state. This bill was introduced to explore the feasibility of building a nuclear power plant in Maine. It ultimately was ought not to pass. There was another bill that would have had the PUC request information about smaller plants, and that did not move forward either. But I do think that as this energy demand grows for data centers, for AI, we're going to see a lot more conversation around this topic. And with that, I think it's a good segue into artificial intelligence more broadly. What is happening around AI, the ethics behind it, the individual protections of information we put in, how it may pull information about you or I, while also balancing innovation and recognizing that it has been a useful tool for businesses for a very long time, much longer than I actually was aware of until more recently. So I think there's going to be some legislation around AI this session, just kind of balancing the ethics while also recognizing and not trying to limit innovation in that space too much. And so that's kind of an area I think we'll see within the technology space start to be, if not addressed, certainly discussed. The other is data privacy. I put an asterisk next to that on the slide. This is a priority issue for the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. There were 2 bills before the legislature last session. We were very engaged in that process. Several states have passed what is referred to as the consensus framework or Connecticut model. This really is a model that the business industry or community has been involved in. And there is another model that is a bit more restrictive in what businesses can do with data. So this will be a major topic again this session before the Judiciary Committee. The chairs of that committee are Senator Carney and Representative Amy Kuhn. They were both involved in the data privacy conversation last session. And I think the chamber will continue to play a very big role in that conversation and just ensuring that we are balancing protections for individuals and their data while also recognizing that many businesses rely on this data for improving their sales, getting their name out there, while there's a big focus on restricting large tech. Ultimately, the platforms that they offer and the data they collect is what small businesses rely on. So this will continue to be a conversation. It's a top priority for the chamber, and you'll certainly hear more about it throughout this session. Richard, if you could switch to the next slide, please. Thank you. Also, just going back real quick, in energy, utilities, and technology, the chairs of that committee are Senator Mark Lawrence. He's returning as the chair, and Representative Melanie Sachs, who is not particularly new to the committee. She's served on it before. Last year, she was on the Appropriations Committee, but she is returning back to EUT as the chair this session. In environment and natural resources, we have Senator Denise Tepler as chair and Representative Vicky Dudera as the House chair. I think, there's a number of things that could happen in this space as we're trying to create a cleaner climate, a more sustainable Maine moving into the future, and kind of looking at how to do that, the challenges and opportunities before us in that space. I think we're going to see more of that this session. One area in particular is EPR packaging. This is another priority issue for the state chamber. Back in 2021, Maine was the first state in the country to adopt a packaging EPR program, which puts the onus of the fee for packaging onto the producer. So essentially the name brand, in many cases, they are now required to pay for the recycling of that packaging that they put around their product rather than municipalities paying for it. The Department of Environmental Protection passed a rule on December 5th this year, establishing kind of the parameters around that program. The chamber definitely would like to see some more alignment with what 4 other states, California, Colorado, Oregon, and Minnesota, have done in their laws. And so our goal this session is really to create a bit more alignment and make this law a bit more workable for the business community. I think some other areas that we'll see before the committee are, a discussion, or certainly environment, not necessarily the ENR committee, but kind of in this area would be EV incentives. So in Maine's Won't Wait Climate Action Plan 2.0, if you will, it came out this past November. They set a goal of 150,000 light duty EVs in Maine by 2030. Interestingly enough, the report came out at the end of November. In mid-November, Efficiency Maine actually had to stop issuing rebates except for to low-income customers because it had already gone through the $13.5 million it had for rebates for EVs in Maine. So I think with this goal, we can definitely continue to see EV incentives. How this is balanced with the budgetary parameters we're kind of up against will be interesting to see, but definitely a conversation to be had there. PFAS was a top issue for the chamber last session, the PFAS in products law. And I believe we'll continue to see some requests for exemptions around PFAS products and also certainly for remediation. There was a spill in the Brunswick area, and so I think there will be hyper focus on remediation for PFAS spills and other contamination into our lands. And then, solid waste infrastructure in Maine continues to be a barrier we're kind of up against, ensuring there is enough capacity. And so I think we can anticipate this out of the ENR committee too. What that actual language will look like in bills is a bit TBD, if you will, but certainly anticipate legislation dealing with solid waste infrastructure. So I will turn it over to Jake LaChance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. As she mentioned, my name is Jake LaChance. I'm part of the advocacy team here at the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. My primary policy areas are labor, healthcare, insurance, financial services, and a smattering of other things. Before diving into these topics, just wanted to address the quick comment in the chat. You are correct that the IDEA Committee is no more. The Select Committee on Housing was moved into kind of that committee and rebranded as Housing and Economic Development. So you'll see a lot of the same issues that were brought up in IDEA, but also with the moving of housing and the needs that we've already talked about throughout our state, they moved the Select Committee on Housing into that committee to have that be more prominent. So just wanted to quickly address that. Starting with the Labor Committee, we have Senator Tipping and Representative Amy Rader as the Senate and House chairs for the Labor Committee. And as we go through these next two slides, these are going to be obviously priorities that we've seen perennially from year to year, as well as new bills that have already been printed, and some bills that are making a resurgence after what I call kind of the legislative purgatory that happened at the end of last session. Starting off, just going to be touching on paid family and medical leave. This is an issue that has dominated both the State House and news cycles, as well as impact on Maine businesses since the law was passed in the spring of 2023. As many of you have probably noticed, the remittance for this program started on January 1st. So the 0.5% will be coming out, has come out of employee paychecks, as well as the 0.5% that employers are responsible for. The benefit for this program does not start until May of 2026. And in terms of legislation this coming session, it's going to be on a pretty wide spectrum of what we're going to see. Obviously, as has been kind of brought up in the news and has been publicized already, there is already a bill for a repeal of the whole program. You will also see advocates of the program put in various pieces of legislation to continue to bolster the program, as well as a bunch of practical fixes that can be made to the program that hopefully makes it more workable and usable for both the employer side and the employee side. In terms of chamber prerogatives. We've really identified 4 or 5 major issues that we want to see addressed in the law. The first being the undue hardship clause. This is something that throughout the process was really put into this law to help safeguard small businesses and to potentially to help address employee absences in relation to folks taking leave. This is something that we've been harping on really all summer and into this session as something that should be following the statutory language of this in terms of the employer determining undue hardship. They're the ones that know what it takes for folks to run their business, the impacts and the various strains that it may cause to their business. So we want to make sure that that continues to be something that is worked on and actually usable for businesses, especially in that smaller business realm. We continue to be concerned with the 3-month remittance that all employers are going to have to face regarding folks that are going to be opting out into a private plan. It was really legislative intent that folks that were going to be seeking a private plan were not going to be having to pay into this program for the state side of things. Unfortunately, there was some work done over the rules over the summer where there was some significant improvements made, but that 3-month period for some businesses is extraordinarily costly. And that's something, excuse me, that's something that the chamber is continuously focused on and is a major priority. We're also focusing on the benefits being taxed at a state level, just like any other modicum of income, as well as some changes to be made to the penalty structure on the employer side of things. Right now, the penalties for employers and employees is terribly skewed. And it's a very harsh environment for penalties for the employer, where just one clerical error could result in 1% of your quarterly payroll just in penalties. So we want to make sure that that is more consistent with what other states are doing and what is more common with other state programs such as unemployment, etc. Going back down the list here, as you see on the slide in front of you, there has been some talk and movement about possibly making small changes to the equal pay law that passed a couple years ago, specifically in relation to the Mundell case that went through the law court here in the state of Maine. What it comes down to is the state law is much more constricting than what is required on the federal level. And we want to make sure that employers, especially in this harsh workforce environment, are able to have the flexibility to hire folks for the opening positions that they have. And obviously pay structures and incentives are a big part of that. So we're expecting to see some legislation in regards to making those kind of technical tweaks to the equal pay law. The next laundry list of things here on this slide is really things that are popping back up for bills that have already been printed from that legislative purgatory of last session. Disclosure of pay ranges, regulation of employer surveillance, flexible work schedules, and agriculture worker minimum wage and bill of rights are all things that we have seen in the past. They're perennial things that have come up that have either been shot down by the legislature or the governor has vetoed. We will continue to be monitoring and addressing those areas of concern in relation to employers. The last thing I want to bring up in regards to the Labor Committee is the workers' compensation benefit analysis that is still continuing to happen within the Workers' Comp Board. There's always the ongoing conversation of what benefits the state is providing in terms of workers' comp and how that affects rates. and the bill that employers are footing in regards to workers' compensation. Those reports are currently being done by the Workers' Compensation Board and Executive Director John Rohde, and we will be continuing to monitor that and weighing in on how that is going to affect the employer side as well as the benefits that are given. Before we go to the next slide, I'll just pop into the chat here to answer a couple of these questions. There's still one party rule, but given news coverage of the issue lately, do you see legislatures and the governor working together to make reasonable changes to the PFML program? I do think that they're just given the state of the legislature and the makeup, with the margins being a little bit slimmer. I think, like I said, there is a wide range of appetite for what people want. But I do think there is a good sense of potential for some practical changes that can be made. I've had conversations, and I know Patrick has had conversations as well, from folks with both sides of the aisle that want to be a part of that kind of collaboration process. So I do see the potential, along with the Mills administration, for reasonable changes to be made. Could there be an aspect of a little bit of uphill sledding with that? Of course, especially with kind of the magnitude of this program and kind of making sure we're doing the right thing the first time, opposed to getting so far down the road that changes aren't being able to be made. So I think there is definitely an appetite under the dome to have some changes be made to this program. In terms of harsh workforce environment, that is mainly just speaking to a variety of employers that are looking to hire and have open spots within their business, whether it be related to the housing conversation we had earlier and not being able to find housing for employees, or just being able to find qualified workers in various industries to be able to fill the openings that are currently there. Obviously the chamber is dedicated to the overall Maine economy and how that works in terms of driving business, and Maine being a state where that is something that is comfortable and welcoming to the employer community. So just working to make sure that those needs are met is really the concerns that we continuously have. Richard, do you mind going to the next slide? In the HCIFS committee, that is going to be chaired again by Senator Donna Bailey, as well as Representative Matheson. They had their orientation yesterday, so I was in there, as well as a confirmation hearing for Commissioner Joan Cohen. So I was able to have some conversations there with that new committee. There are some new faces on that committee, as well as a number of first-time legislators. Representative Foley is also returning to that committee, who's been in the industry and part of the legislature before, and he's a welcome face to see back, as well as a number of other returning members to that committee. This slide here just kind of highlights, again, bills that have already been printed and what we kind of see as perennial issues that do come up in this committee. Obviously, they're going to be continually talking about annual mandates for pharmaceutical products, as well as insurance coverage and how that kind of fits with plan design. AI and prior authorization. Ashley spoke to the kind of the AI component and how it kind of overall relates to policy. But when it comes to kind of the healthcare financial services side of things, there's going to be some implications there as well. Healthcare Purchasers Alliance claims audit is something that will be ongoing in terms of impacts to purchasers and folks that are related to those programs. just because of where it falls. Obviously, Ashley touched on various PFAS things that will be happening in the future in relation to prior laws that have been passed. There is currently a bill in for a PFAS response program and attempting to allocate funds to address PFAS contamination around the state. And then biomarker testing is something that always kind of pops up, including a bill for increasing Maine care reimbursement rates for ambulance services. These are all things that could very well have implications for the employer community, and we will obviously continue to monitor any new bills that are written to update you on those things. With that, to wrap up here, I will turn it back over to Linda to talk about the budget and the tax committee.
Well, with respect to taxation, we have several bills in this year. We've got the child care tax legislation that we put in last year, or two sessions ago. Trey Stewart sponsoring this, and basically what this bill would do is provide up to a $3,000 tax credit for employers that provide in-kind or just pay outright childcare expenses for their employees. So that is a bill that's in. Childcare is a huge issue for employees. This helps them pay for that because it provides a credit to the employers, and we think it's the right way to go. The R&D tax credit bill, Representative Dan Sayer is sponsoring this for us this year. Last year, this is going to take a little bit of a different turn. The way that R&D tax credit works right now, it's really unworkable for businesses because you have to take a look back at 3 years of your expenses, take the average, and if you go above that, you can take the credit. Dan has I think some interesting ideas that he wants to pursue, and I will work very closely with him on that. We don't have details right now, but we're going to be working on that over the next few months. So I'm confident that we can put something forth that the business community will support. And I know where our taxation committee wants to go. So we'll work closely with him, and I'm looking forward to that. The pass-through entity tax bill. This is an important piece of legislation. Representative Tavis Hassenfuss is putting the bill in. And really what this does is the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act back in 2017 limited the amount of state and local taxes owners can itemize on their federal returns. The pass-through entity tax is a tax structure, or it's a workaround that people have used that helps owners of pass-through entities like subchapter S corps, LLCs, partnerships, avoid the SALT limitations that were in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and preserve the deductibility of their state payments. It's a mechanism that allows businesses, such as partnerships, LLCs, to pay taxes at the entity level. Typically with pass-throughs, income passes through to the individual owners who pay taxes on their individual tax returns. Under the pass-through entity tax, pass-through entities would pay taxes at the entity level rather than the individual level. And the pass-through entity tax paid by the entity is treated as a business expense and is deductible at the federal level, lowering your federal income taxes. So business owners will receive a credit on their Maine returns for taxes paid at the entity level. Last session, the Taxation Committee dealt with this in LD 1891. They passed it as a resolve asking Maine Revenue Services to study this issue. Maine Revenue Services is supposed to come back this January to present a report to the Taxation Committee on what their recommendations are. But I really, this is going to help thousands of businesses across the state. And depending on how they structure that credit, it could be a huge savings to the state, not huge, but some savings to the state. So they'd be more apt to pass it because it's a revenue raiser. So we're going to be following this very closely. This will help a lot of small or medium-sized businesses. So this is going to be really important. And I've seen the legislation that Representative Hassenfuss has put in, and I think we can support that the way it is because it is on an elective basis. So with that, the SaaS issue. Software as a service, it's called. And basically this provision was slipped into the budget. This is going to be a bill sponsored by Jack Ducharme for us. This was a provision slipped into the budget last year. And basically what it would do is apply the sales tax to canned software, software that's accessed in the cloud or downloaded or stored on a server. And it'll apply the sales tax to that. this was very, not many folks understood it. And they looked at it as a consumer software tax, but it really is translating into a business software tax. So what we've done is we've basically we're going to be putting legislation in to reverse that. We were hoping the governor would do that in her budget. We've been working very closely with the administration and with Maine Revenue to try to get them to reverse this in the budget, because there was really no discussion, from what I'm told, in appropriations about this. So from, Representatives Ducharme and Sound Millet. So, we're hoping that she puts that in the budget to reverse it, but we're not sure that she will. And we're putting this bill in just in case. In taxation, you're going to see a number of issues, corporate disclosure, local option, bills to increase individual income tax. And we're pleased to see that Governor Mills kind of said, no, we don't really want to go there. But you're going to see a lot of different bills that we've seen over the past few years. And we'll see some new bills, new issues arise. Typically, Maine is one of those states where, you see something in California or Oregon, it comes to Maine at some point. So we're going to be busy in tax this year. We've got some legislation that we want to see passed. So with that, if there's no questions, I will turn it back over to Patrick.
Well, thank you, Linda. Thank you, Ashley, and thank you, Jake. If there aren't any questions, I'll just reinforce that the Maine State Chamber of Commerce does think that there's some important provisions to improve the business climate. Paid family medical leave, we certainly think there are best practices in other states that we can build upon that ensures this is working for employees, employers, and ensures that the utilization of paid family medical leave is consistent with legislative intent. Furthermore, housing, as Speaker Fecteau articulated, this is an issue that affects a whole generation. Affordability has become an issue, and it's a tension between municipal home rule and what has become a state crisis. I think a real linchpin for how states perform economically over the next 3 to 5 years is housing starts. How many more housing units can be constructed? We have a plan in the state of 80,000 units. Can we make progress on meeting that, both statewide and regionally? Pass-through entity tax is one that is a clear win for the Maine business community. The vast majority of other states have adopted this provision to allow reducing federal tax liability and actually increasing some state revenues. The privacy legislation, we continue to monitor. We think that Maine should build upon the work of many other New England states, protect key privacy data that consumers provide, but also ensure that companies can continue to do targeted marketing for their products. Maine should not be an outlier. We need to attract people to our state and our tourism, and our retailers need to be able to access customers. And then finally, we do see the extended producer responsibility law similarly positioned that we do need to replicate some of the best practices of other states. It's currently written. We think this would be problematic from an efficiency standpoint, a cost standpoint for consumers, and we should build upon the work of other states that passed the law after Maine's leadership. With that, if there are no questions, I do want to thank our sponsors again, Speaker Fecteau for joining us this morning, the advocacy staff for their presentation, and look for all of you to continue working with us as we look to have a productive session in the 132nd legislature. Thank you all.